For those looking for a liberatory martial arts learning approach and curriculum, we've created Liberation Martial Arts. It doesn't just teach you martial arts, it's also a radical and alternative approach to learning. Thanks to Lester, Space Cat, Samira, Solomon, and Dataso for signing up. Sign up for Liberation Martial Arts at the Southpaw Pod Patreon, or support us by signing up for one of our other tiers or by becoming a sponsor. This will give you access to bonus content, transcripts, and uncut versions of our shows without breaks or interruptions. Those in the Patreon sponsor tier also get a monthly training session with me. If you prefer to support others, your sponsorship can go to the training of an organizer instead. There's also ways to make one-time contributions. Find all our links at southpawpod.com. This is Sam.
And this is Fight Study.
What's up, everyone? It's been a long time since I've recorded anything on here related to the UFC or MMA. Let me give you the secondary reasons why I've been absent before I go into the main reasons. Secondary reasons are, one, I've been busy with the Liberation Martial Arts program, not only in developing the online curriculum, but also in running LMA classes in person. I also do remote consultations for people who run their own martial arts clubs. And in the last few months, I've also had a lot of people come from out of town to learn our approach. And I've been wanting to give them my full attention. Also, as far as content is concerned, I've still been putting out a lot of content, maybe just not in podcast form, but I do a lot more writing than I do podcasts. And so I'm frequently releasing my thoughts via free articles on the Southpaw Patreon or the Liberation Martial Arts Substack. It's just much easier and quicker for me to generate a lot of content that way. You could also find smaller bite-sized contents and ideas on the Liberation Martial Arts Instagram or the Southpaw Facebook account. I'm off of Twitter now, but Substack and Patreon both have their own versions of Twitter where people can post bite-sized little thoughts and notes, and I use that frequently as well. I'm also a dad, so a lot of my time and attention has been going toward my son, who's still very young and who's also been having some struggles and challenges that I won't go into here. But he's always a priority, of course. My partner is also a priority. Then I have the Deep Space Nine Star Trek show where we watch and discuss every episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It's called Southpaw Deep Space Nine. However, that's been a constant. So that's not a new thing that's been taking up my energy. But if you're a Star Trek fan and you want to hear a political and anti-imperial take on Star Trek and Deep Space Nine, check it out. New episodes are on Patreon. Old episodes are on the Southpaw Podcast RSS feed. Now, for the main reasons I haven't done any fight studies or talking about the UFC. To borrow a term from pro wrestling where shows and just the overall brand is called products, the UFC product and MMA in general have been very low quality. It's terrible. English language MMA has mostly gone out of business thanks to the UFC. However, the UFC puts on a lot of terrible fights, especially because it's a monopoly, so it can. It doesn't have to compete against anybody. We here at Southpaw discuss fights from the perspective of strategy and technique and style matchups, the art and science of it, because the Dana White era politics have always been reactionary. So rather than doing the same social commentary over and over where we just talk about how bad the UFC is, We stuck to the parts we still found interesting, the art and science. Art, as in the subjective interpretation of offensive openings and the subjective nature of using your attributes to score points. The science, as in what makes something effective. What's more effective than what the other person is doing? And since it's MMA, there are so many dimensions to all that. It used to be very fascinating. Now it's generally slop. When there is a good fight, there aren't enough other good fights to discuss an entire card. If you watch the product, you know what I'm talking about. And of course, I'm sick of seeing Trump. I'm also sick of seeing Dana and Joe Rogan. But now you got them plus shitty fights. So there isn't much appealing. So have I stopped watching combat sports? Not at all. In fact, I watch more than ever. I'm also at more local shows. Go support a local combat sports show or MMA show. Those are fun too. Go support your local fighters. Go watch your local MMA fighter, your local Muay Thai fighter, your local boxer. You don't just have to watch the UFC or try to just only go to UFC shows. And on top of that, martial arts is also something you can participate in. So instead of just watching it all the time, you could go try some of it. I've also been busy with my own fighters as they go compete in their own shows and competitions. But as far as a home spectator, a lot of my time is spent watching Muay Thai, in particular RWS, which currently airs a weekly show for free on YouTube. It also has English language commentary. And they've changed the format a bit to make it more international friendly. It's also one of the only Muay Thai shows that features women fighters. That's also a big plus. And it doesn't just have fighters from Thailand, but international talent. And it's really cool to see how international fighters approach it. The commentary is also far less annoying than MMA commentary. Now, as far as thinking about international fighters, most become full Thaibu influencers who live in Thailand and try to fight exactly like the Thais. The number of Muay Thai influencers in Thailand is astronomical. I'd guess it has the highest per capita. But some foreigners try to bring their own unique interpretation of Muay Thai to Thailand. They're going to do it their own way. And they've been finding success, much to the concern of many Thai gyms. Many fight promoters and industry leaders like Mr. Philip Wong, the head of Fairtex, have told the Thai community that they need to update their training approach if they want to remain dominant in their own sport. So there's been a bit of a Muay Thai arms race, which has been fun to see. I also watch ONE for kickboxing and also for a bit of their version of Muay Thai. I say their version because it's not really Muay Thai, but they have good Muay Thai fighters doing it. So I occasionally watch just to see those fighters. I don't watch their MMA or their grappling product at all. I don't find it a good product. However, ONE is getting harder to watch because a lot of it used to be free on YouTube, but now they've launched their own streaming service. So now I'm finding myself watching less of it. Though if you're not aware of any of their kickboxers or Muay Thai fighters, you can find a lot of their old fights for free on YouTube. They also still have a free weekly show on YouTube from Lumpini. But the interesting thing to see now in ONE is the rise of the Japanese kickboxing style. There's been a bit of a Thailand versus Japan rivalry, and it's not just about fighters being from different countries, but also a style clash. You're even seeing gyms in Thailand incorporating Japanese kickboxing techniques. I also occasionally watch boxing when there's a fighter or fighters I'm interested in, like Naoya Inoue. He's just a high quality boxer, and so is his recent opponent, Junto Nakatani, just two of the world's best. However, I still watch UFC fights when there's a fight I want to see, like JDM versus Carlos Prates. But That was the only fight on the card that I was interested in. For this fight study, I'm going to cover the fights I've watched recently and share my takeaways. First, let's talk about Duong Danoy, a really exciting and aggressive female Thai fighter who has transitioned to one's version of Muay Thai, which uses MMA gloves. Because of the gloves, punches just score so much more than they would in traditional stadium Muay Thai. They break up clinches faster than they do in the stadium. I don't think dumps score at all. There are also a lot of techniques, movements, and strategies that disappear because of the risk of eye pokes. It ends up looking a lot like MMA striking. Now, watching one is complicated. They have a weekly show that's free on YouTube, the Friday Night Fights, but they also have a show on Amazon Prime. They also have pay-per-views. They also have their own streaming service. So it's a hot mess. But they are signing a lot of the great strikers, like Duong Danoy, who used to fight on RWS. So if I want to follow her career, I end up searching for her fights on YouTube before they get taken down. Duong Danoy fought Yana Yip, and watching this fight is a reminder that when you do Muay Thai, you'd better get good at all the tools because Yip mostly had punching. Duong Danoy had punches, knees, elbows, and kicks. So you do the math. If I have 4 ways to score and you only have 1 way to score, unless you can really hurt me or put me away, I am going to score more points. And that's what Duong Danoy did. Yip was an excellent puncher. However, so is Duong Danoy. And Duong Danoy countered Yip's punches with her own punches, plus kicks, plus elbows, plus knees. And over the rounds, what accumulates isn't just points, but also damage, especially to the body. Duong Danoy kept building momentum while Yip began fading. Duong Danoy won a clear unanimous decision. If you're fighting Muay Thai, you don't need to be great at everything, but you want to have a base level of competency at everything, even if you have a specialty. Otherwise, to use a basketball analogy, you'll be scoring 2s while they're scoring 3s. And scoring 2s actually costs more energy than scoring 3s. If I'm mostly punching, I'm wearing my arms out over time, whereas my opponent, who is using all their skills, is limiting their muscular fatigue. And so speaking of strike variety, let's talk about the recent UFC in Perth, Australia, headlined by Jack Della Maddalena versus Carlos Prates. JDM is a former welterweight champion, so this was his chance to get back in the title picture. For Prates, this was his chance to get closer to a title shot. And for 3 rounds, you had Prates using his full striking arsenal of punches, knees, kicks, and elbows. JDM relied on his punches. However, his punch output was low. He shelled up to get close, would eat punches, kicks, and knees. And when he was in range, the moment he opened his arms to throw a punch, Prates would cut him off with a jab or a knee. JDM has a style that requires timing. Prates wouldn't give him that time. Prates also relied on head movement as his main form of defense, which freed up his arms to strike. Since JDM relies on a high guard, his arms were busy defending most of the time, which didn't give him many opportunities to punch. So then he needed takedowns, except JDM is mostly a striker, not a wrestler, and Prates is used to wrestlers. Prates was also gliding around the cage in this fight, keeping his feet really light, whereas JDM plods forward, which limits his mobility, but lets him sit down on his punches. When they're available, that is. Most of the time, they were not. Even when JDM was getting hurt, he was coming forward. This doesn't have to do with grit or courage. It's because when he tried to back away, the punishment was worse. The poison was less painful coming forward. However, damage was accumulating either way, so he was doomed one way or another. JDM has one offensive tool, which is his punching, and Prates never gave him an opportunity to use that offensive weapon. So it ended up being a shutout where you saw Prates drop JDM several times. He dropped him with kicks, punches, elbows, and knees. And on the ground, he finished JDM with elbows. It's not that the former champ is terrible, it's just that there was a big skill gap in striking, and JDM lacked the grappling to overcome that gap. In fact, JDM probably didn't know he needed grappling to beat Prates. He probably thought he could outstrike him until he eventually got in there with him. I also wonder what all the accumulated damage JDM has taken has done to him. The title could have been his peak, and now he's past his prime. Now let's talk about Naoya Inoue versus Junto Nakatani, a fight between two of the current pound-for-pound bests and two undefeated fighters. Nakatani is the taller, longer fighter, but Inoue is an all-time great. It was competitive, but Inoue just had the advantage when it came to speed, accuracy, and timing. For UFC fans, the head coach for Nakatani is Rudy Hernandez. He's the UFC cut man who always has a toothpick in his mouth. He's coached a lot of Japanese fighters and champions. Nakatani is a southpaw and Inoue is orthodox. So when you have fighters in opposite stances, that's always a style clash. However, unlike in MMA, where opposite stances mean you just look to throw the rear straight to the head and look for that knockout, you'll see really good boxers throw the rear to the body. And that's what Inoue did. He would jab, throw the rear to the body, and escape. When Nakatani tried to counter, Inoue escaped and then countered the counter. Inoue was also not afraid to fight in close and trade hooks. It takes a lot of talent to fight like Inoue because you not only need speed, but balance. The fight was competitive, but Inoue was still getting the better of exchanges. If I score twice for every one you score is competitive, but not close. Now let's talk about One Samurai, their pay-per-view card from Japan, headlined by Rodtang versus Takeru 2 in a kickboxing title bout. In the rematch, Takeru looked healthy and strong, but Rodtang looked slow. He didn't have the same power or volume that he's known for. He waited a lot, and when he fired back, he didn't have his signature power. And one sad note, his iron chin crumbled in this fight. Takeru's timing and power were on full display, and unlike some of his teammates, Takeru doesn't lack in volume. It was a one-sided fight where Takeru dropped and hurt Rodtang several times before finishing him in round 5. A fight is psychological, and once the fighter feels like your shots can't hurt me and I see my shots are hurting you, you start to feel relief. You get more of your executive function back. You have more energy and better vision and motor control. Rodtang needs confidence, and he was losing confidence, whereas Takeru was gaining confidence. That momentum was hard to turn around, and Rodtang just looked weak in this fight. It was troubling. In one Muay Thai, you had a Japanese fighter, Naraka, defending his title against Songchainoy from Thailand. Naraka is probably one of the best movers in combat sports. He can just move around his opponents while sticking close to them, which gives him offensive options while keeping himself safe. Songchainoy has power, but he couldn't find Naraka, and Naraka struck and moved. He was never stationary long enough for Songchainoy to unload his power. Songchainoy had moments, but for the most part, Naraka outpunched and outkicked them. Naraka can find places in the ring that other fighters can't. Places that keep him safe while keeping his opponents in danger. He can finish you, or in this fight, if he can't finish you, he can ensure he wins the rounds while you can't. Then, in a kickboxing title fight, you had Jonathan Haggerty versus Yuki Yoza. This was much anticipated because Yoza already has big wins and has beaten Superlek, who has beaten Haggerty twice. Yoza seemed like he was going to take the division over. But like Naraka, Haggerty was able to move around Yoza and make himself invisible. Yoza couldn't find him. He ended up just waiting and looking for him, but not getting much volume off while Haggerty was constantly scoring with jabs and straights. Yoza is known for his various kicks, and the question everyone had was, How would Haggerty block those kicks when no one else had? And Haggerty's answer wasn't to block them, but to move around so those kicks couldn't find him. Haggerty won an easy decision with movement and volume. Yoza ended up following him around, similar to how JDM was following Prates around, and waiting too long and not scoring enough. Yoza has good defense, and kickboxing gloves make the high guard much more effective than MMA gloves. So Yoza was never hurt, but he was also never winning. Yoza also looked visibly winded, despite not putting that much output. I don't know what his shape was like for this fight. Also, it's tiring to get hit, and it's tiring to defend. I've also seen Yoza lose like this in kickboxing before, where he loses on volume. I think some fighters get caught up in Yoza's reputation and want to prove they are the better kicker and end up losing. Haggerty wanted to prove he was a better fighter, not a better kicker. In a kickboxing bout, you had Marat Grigorian versus Kato. And I've seen this before with people who fight Grigorian. They want to prove they're the better pressure fighter and bully. And that's not a good way to fight Grigorian because he has really good defense and uniquely hard punches. He also has great timing and can spot openings in your defense. He'll be passive, let you punch and kick at him, and then if he spots an opening, he's not going to throw one strike, but throw several hard strikes in a row. That's what happened in this fight. Grigorian found an opening as they were fighting from close and finished Kato in round 1. Now let's talk about my favorite combat sports promotion, RWS, which takes place in Thailand. Let me preface this by saying this is entertainment Muay Thai, which is different from standard stadium Muay Thai. They do day before weigh-ins, so you'll see more size mismatches. It's also open scoring. And it's scored round by round, so there's much more volume than a typical stadium fight. They also use incentives to promote more action. They often break up clinches faster because they don't want it to turn into a stall. The format is 2 prelims followed by 4 main fights, and they try to always have at least one title fight in the main card. Then the last fight is a swing bout, which is an undercard bout they use to fill time. The first prelim was a fight between Guo, a Chinese fighter, and Carter, a British fighter. Carter is only 17 and has more Muay Thai fights than Guo. Guo, like many Chinese fighters, is actually a kickboxer who's fighting under Muay Thai rules. And so he has less Muay Thai experience than Carter. The Chinese fighters tend to have really fast, powerful hands. Their best path to victory is by a knockout. But being kickboxers, once they get clinched up, they're often lost. And that's been the successful path to beating Chinese fighters, which is what happened in this fight. The next prelim fight was between Pechsomai versus Sobirov. This was a short fight that ended by KO in round 1. Pechsomai had the speed advantage and caught Sobirov with a left hook as Sobirov was using a switch as a feint. That's the downside of switch kicks because there's an extra step before you kick. Opponents can see it coming. But here, Sobirov used a switch as a feint, then switched back, then tried to kick. This turned out to be just a telegraph for Pechsomai. The first main card fight was between Quekok versus Victorino. Here you see a beautiful teep to the liver by Quekok. After the knockdown, Quekok coasted the rest of the fight to secure the victory over Victorino, which is a common strategy you see in stadium Muay Thai. The next fight featured 2 Europeans, Doherty versus Ba. Doherty is from England and Ba is from France. There was a big height difference, with Doherty being the taller and longer fighter. This fight was a good illustration of how different strategies play out. Doherty mixed punches and body kicks. Ba mostly relied on calf kicks and occasional punch flurries. The problem with the calf kick approach is that unless you can get a finish, you might lose out on volume. For every calf kick, he ate punches and body kicks. It's not an equivalent exchange. So Ba scored with calf kicks but lost every round. Sometimes fighters spend too much time spamming a particular strike rather than focusing on winning the exchanges. The next fight was Pechdam versus Pechonlatharn. Pechdam was the favorite, but Pechonlatharn beat him with pace. He was the harder worker. He would strike first or strike every time Pechdam struck. So he was always one strike ahead of Pechdam in every exchange and essentially shut out the favorite in every round. More output in a fight means you score more. Then there was the main event, a title fight between Marie Rumette versus Jiti. And it's cool to see women headline a stadium event because for a long time, women were not allowed to fight in Muay Thai. And then it was only foreign women allowed. That's why historically you've had more female foreign champions. But now there's a lot of female Thai fighters who've been training since they were little kids. Yet still, foreign women dominate. And here's the cheat code foreign women have used to beat Thai women. You clinch them. Why Thai women are so vulnerable in the clinch is unknown. I haven't seen anyone address it yet. But that is always the strategy that foreign women have used against Thai women, and it works most of the time. The paradox is this doesn't work against Thai men, only Thai women. That's what Rumette did in this fight. She shut Jiti down with clinch and knees, setting a knee strike record. Jiti just ate knees and offered very little in return. So when you see Mr. Wong from Fairtex freaking out about foreigners dominating Muay Thai, he's also factoring in the women's divisions, where there's no debate. Foreign women do dominate it. I think the Muay Thai community in Thailand didn't really care for a long time until they began seeing more of the men lose. But this could become a rivalry like in wrestling, where because of national pride, you see more improvements and innovations in techniques and training. So we'll see how the Thais respond to the increase in foreign competition, and if we'll see a changing of the guard in women's Muay Thai, where Thai women finally dominate their own sport. And in the final swing bout, we have Saab from Lebanon versus Putra from Indonesia. Saab was the much bigger fighter. You can have big size mismatches, not only because of weight cuts, but also because the other fighter might have taken a fight above their normal weight. Putra being smaller meant he had to crash forward to get his offense going, which Saab could intercept with elbows. The fight was stopped in round 2 due to a cut, which means Saab wins by TKO. It always pays to be the taller, longer fighter in Muay Thai because unlike in boxing, where shorter fighters might have an advantage from in close, in Muay Thai, tall fighters still have elbows and knees. If you're a shorter fighter, being in your punching range might mean being in their elbow and knee range. It's not equivalent. And that's all the fights for this week. If you've been looking for good fights, you can watch for free with English language commentary. Check out the free weekly shows on YouTube for RWS M1. If you like this episode and like what we do, support us on Patreon. We also have the Liberation Martial Arts program if you want to train with us from wherever you are. What you're learning is how to teach yourself. It's also an approach you can take with you into the world. Those in the sponsor tier get a monthly training session with me, either in person or online. You can also sponsor the training of an organizer instead, or support our training organizer program or me directly. Find all our links at salpapod.com. With that said, thanks for listening.